people train muscles without truly understanding what they are. That misunderstanding is why progress stalls, injuries happen, and fitness myths spread. If you understand how muscle really works, every workout you do from today onward becomes more effective. Today I'm going to share foundational knowledge about muscle growth. Knowledge I've gained through 5 years of medical training and regular strength training in the gym. Quick reminder, I will use some technical terms because they are essential for understanding muscle growth properly. However, I will explain everything in a simple and clear way. First, we need to understand why muscles exist in our body. To understand muscles, we first need a brief understanding of the human body. Humans are living organisms, and the human body is organized into several levels. Let's look at what those levels are. Our body is made up of multiple systems. These systems are made up of organs are made up of tissues, and tissues are made up of cells. These are known as the levels of biological organization. Just keep this concept in the back of your mind as we move forward. As living beings, humans perform several fundamental functions, such as movement, respiration, nutrition, growth and development, reproduction, and response to stimuli. For many of these functions, we have specialized systems. For example, for respiration, respiratory system; for nutrition, gastrointestinal system; for response to stimuli, nervous system. Likewise, for movement, we have the musculoskeletal system. Since our topic is muscle growth, we will focus on this system. The musculoskeletal system is primarily composed of bones and skeletal muscles. Bones provide the structure and framework of the body. Movement occurs when bones move relative to each other, and this movement is produced by muscle contraction. So we have muscles to produce movement. That is why muscles exist. Now let's look at what muscles actually are. For your interest, there are 3 types of muscle in the human body. Skeletal muscle. This type of muscle is attached to bones and is responsible for moving them. These are the only muscles we train in the gym by lifting weights. Smooth muscle, found in organs such as the gut and bladder. Cardiac muscle, found in the heart. Everything we discuss on this channel focuses on skeletal muscle. Now let's look at the parts of a muscle. Let's use this diagram to understand muscle structure. Here we have 2 bones, and between them is a muscle. A muscle has 2 ends and is always connected to bones through tendons. Between these 2 tendons is the muscle belly. When a muscle contracts, it shortens, and the distance between its 2 ends decreases. Because the tendons are attached to bones, the bones move relative to each other. The attachment point of a muscle that remains relatively fixed or stable during contraction is called the origin. It is usually located closer to the trunk or attached to the less movable bone. The insertion is the attachment point that moves toward the origin during muscle contraction. It is usually located farther from the trunk and attached to the more movable bone. Shortening of a muscle is called contraction, and lengthening of a muscle causes stretching. Now this muscle is made up of bundles of muscle cells. Let's take a closer look at one of these muscle cells. Inside a muscle cell are structures called myofibrils. These are arranged like parallel threads within a muscle fiber. The myofibrils are made up of repeating contractile segments. This is what one contractile segment looks like. Each segment works using 2 protein filaments that slide against each other: actin, which is the thin filament, and myosin, which is the thick filament. Myosin has a head that can bend, and actin has specific binding sites where the myosin head can attach. How do muscles work? When you decide to move, nerve impulses travel from the brain to the muscle. Once the impulse reaches the muscle, a series of complex processes occur inside the muscle cell. During these processes, the myosin heads bind to actin filaments. The myosin heads then bend, pulling the actin filaments toward each other. This causes the contractile segments to shorten. Muscle contraction occurs when thin filaments slide past thick filaments, shortening the contractile units. As a result, the myofibrils shorten, then the muscle fibers shorten, and finally the entire muscle shortens. How do muscles grow? You've probably heard the term hypertrophy. Most people use it as a technical word for muscle growth. While that isn't wrong, it is incomplete. In the human body, an organ can grow in 2 main ways. One is by increasing the number of cells through cell division. This is called hyperplasia. Skeletal muscle cells do not divide like most other cells. Instead, when they are trained, the muscle cells increase in size. As a result, the muscle becomes bigger. This process is called hypertrophy. Now let's look at how this hypertrophy happens. When you lift weights, you provide a stimulus for muscle growth. There are three primary stimuli involved in hypertrophy: mechanical tension, most important; metabolic stress; muscle damage. So what is mechanical tension? Let's use a cable as an example. When a cable is loose, there is no tension in it. But when we pull it from both ends, tension starts to build up inside the cable. The harder we pull, the greater the tension. The same idea applies to muscles. When a weight is applied, it creates a force that tries to move the bones relative to each other at a joint. The muscle resists this movement by contracting. When a muscle contracts against an external load, tension develops within the muscle tissue. This force-related tension inside the muscle is called mechanical tension. This tension is not limited to the whole muscle. It is transmitted down to the individual muscle fibers and ultimately to the myofibrils, which are the smallest contractile units inside the muscle. Mechanical tension is the primary driver of muscle hypertrophy. Now let's talk about metabolic stress. Imagine a muscle working continuously without enough time to fully rest. As it keeps contracting, energy is used and metabolic byproducts begin to accumulate inside the muscle. These byproducts include substances such as lactate, hydrogen ions, and other metabolites. As they accumulate, the internal environment of the muscle changes and the muscle begins to fatigue. This internal buildup of metabolites and the stress it creates inside the muscle is called metabolic stress. And finally, muscle damage. When a muscle is exposed to unfamiliar or high levels of stress, small microscopic disruptions can occur within the muscle fibers. This is what we refer to as muscle damage. It is microscopic and not the same as an injury. All three of these stimuli contribute to muscle hypertrophy. Now, as the final step, let's look at how hypertrophy actually occurs. Remember, hypertrophy means an increase in the size of muscle cells. This happens through two main mechanisms. 1. Myofibrillar hypertrophy. 2. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. What is myofibrillar hypertrophy? In response to the training stimuli, new proteins are synthesized within the muscle cell. These proteins form new actin, myosin, and other contractile components. As a result, new parallel layers of contractile units are built, leading to an increase in the number of myofibrils within the muscle fiber. This process is called myofibrillar hypertrophy. As the amount of contractile material within the muscle fiber increases, force production increases. This is why, as your muscles grow, you usually become stronger. What is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy? Within the muscle cell, in between the myofibrils, there is a fluid-like substance called sarcoplasm. In response to training stimuli, the volume of this sarcoplasm can increase, causing the muscle fiber to become larger. This contributes to an increase in muscle size. In the end, both mechanisms lead to a larger muscle cell, which eventually results in a larger muscle. And importantly, this process occurs during recovery. Now you should have a clear idea of how muscle growth works. In simple terms, this process depends on three main pillars: training stimulus, lifting weights that are challenging enough to place stress on the muscles and signal them to grow. Recovery, getting enough rest and sleep, which is when the muscles actually repair and grow through protein synthesis. Nutrition, eating food that provides the energy needed for training and the building blocks called amino acids that muscles need to grow during recovery. From this point onward, all videos on this channel will be categorized under these three main topics. We will also use 3 color codes to make them easy to identify and understand. With that, we'll finish today's lesson.